How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Hatchet II from 2010. This is once again written and directed by Adam Green, and this time around we star Danielle Harris, Todd and Kane Hodder, all of who are pretty big names in the horror industry, but we also have a few other familiar faces, in particular R.A. Mihailoff, aka Leatherface from Part 3, he's in here, and Child's Play director Tom Holland actually has an acting part in this as well, so pretty cool. And overall, this is a really interesting movie. It actually starts off the very frame that Hatchet 1 ends on, and is a direct continuation from the first, something they would mimic in Part 3, and in turn, you can view the original Hatchet trilogy as one big long movie if you want to, but it's a really good idea. You really do keep the world and the atmosphere and that feel from the first movie going, because you had so many things in the first movie that you set up and reinvented and will apply in here. There's some really cool callbacks to the first, and having it literally be the next day, it really does keep the energy flowing. Victor Crowley is still in his swamp, we still get that Louisiana atmosphere, and we're going to have some fun and over-the-top kills. Now that being said, yeah, sometimes this movie can feel a little derivative, and the plot of a bunch of hunters going into the woods to kill Victor Crowley is a little bit flat, although granted the first movie didn't have the most complex plot in the world either, and also most of the characters being hunters, they don't stand out, and like the first movie, every single character had their own gag and they all really stood out, so it's not quite as funny or surprising as the first one, and I will say, yeah, it feels a little sequel-y, but overall that's not too terribly bad. The first one had such good energy, and a sequel with the goal of just trying to keep that up, it still works and it still feels very fun, but besides, you're doing a slasher throwback movie, it really wouldn't work on a conceptual level if you only had one movie, so you know what, I did like the first one better, but it was still really fun and it still had a lot to really like, and it did bring enough new and interesting and different stuff to the table to make it worth it. So I do like this movie, not as well as the first, but it is a pretty fun one, and I definitely recommend checking it out. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, what's the movie about? I don't want to do any major spoilers, but I do want to break down and analyze a few plot points and, you know, say my piece on a few things. I'll be avoiding the end bits and I'll try not to ruin anything too big, but let's do a bit of a deeper dive. As I said earlier, we open up right where Hatchet 1 ended. Victor Crowley was screaming at the camera and we had a hard cut, and now we open up with Victor Crowley screaming at the camera, and there's Danielle Harris floating in the water. I really do love keeping that momentum and cutting right back to that last scene, and also it helps establish that Danielle Harris is Mary Beth this time around. From what I hear, it sounds like they wanted to get the last actress back, but she was unavailable, and Danielle Harris was actually considered for the first movie, but Adam Green thought, I can't possibly put in this many Easter eggs, right? Casting Danielle would be too much, but even though for continuity's sake it would be cool if they had the same actress, if you're going to replace her, replacing her with Danielle Harris is a good choice. It's always great to see her. Well, Danielle manages to get Crowley in the eye with her thumb and is able to swim away when she's saved by the crazy Ralph character. So yeah, getting to see a minor character back for some more scenes in the second, we are really tying these two movies together where it does feel like one really big long idea, one long story in the same world. Well, while he gets her back to her cabin and saves her, the crazy Ralph character, when he finds out who her father is, kicks her out and says, go see Reverend Zombie if you want to know why I'm upset, and that gives her a bit of a mission. She goes down to see Zombie, aka Todd's character, and I do love that we set him up in the first movie, and now he's a major character in this one. And I think the idea was that he did the cameo, and they had kind of worked out when they did the cameo that if they were able to get a sequel, they would call him back for a larger role. And it really does show that planning really does help, because I love the setup having a payoff in part 2. And it's always great to see Todd. He does a really good job in this movie. Reverend Zombie being this over-the-top character that you never know if you can trust or not. It's a really good role, and I think this is one of Tony Todd's best characters, obviously outside of Candyman, of course. But when they get him talking, Tony Todd explains that he was actually doing the tours through another company that he secretly owned, so he actually did own the tour boat from part 1, and he said, I told the driver not to go that far into the swamp and to not stop for any reason. So he's like, I didn't think anything would actually happen, even though I do very well know the story. And he actually recounts the story again, this time providing a little bit more detail. And I really do love getting more of Victor Crowley's origin. It doesn't feel derivative, and it doesn't feel like they're throwing in unnecessary details. It actually is adding in another very interesting piece to his backstory, and we get to see Kane Hodder out of makeup again, so really cool stuff. Well, after this, Tony Todd decides to assemble a posse to go hunt Victor Crowley. He says that he wants his boat back, and if he can kill Victor Crowley, then he has the whole swamp to himself, and people can hunt gators and do tours there all they want. So he has a monetary incentive. Danielle Harris says she just wants her family's bodies to lay them to rest, and I love that Tony Todd questions this and says, you sure you want that, or are you secretly here for revenge? Great little touch. But we get a bunch of monster hunters. R.A. Mihailoff is playing this guy who's older and kind of down on his luck, and an old friend of Tony Todd. And like Tony Todd's offering everybody $500, which is nothing to sneeze at, but nothing worth risking your life for. But he goes up to R.A. Mihailoff and is like, you're my friend, I can secretly give you a little more under the table. And we get a few other characters, like there's one who's constantly telling jokes, and there's another two that are like a couple that had broken up, and there's a little bit of tension. We also get the brother of the boat captain from the first movie, played by the same actor, which I think that's a really fun callback. There's several times in this movie where they find cool ways to call back to the first characters. Like there's another scene where they find the producer's camera from the first movie in this, and we get some callbacks in that. But I will say it's cool to see this actor back, but the boat captain from the first movie is still, in my opinion, the better character, the way he was doing all that showmanship. You know, we get a little bit from his brother, but not quite as much. And if you go back and watch the first movie, they actually do say he had a brother. I love that planning and connectivity. That's really cool. But outside of that, they are kind of just a bunch of monster hunters, and I wish that they all had more bigger, more distinct, and different personalities. Again, the crew of Hatchet 1 was so iconic, and I kind of wish we got more of that here. And when we go into the woods again, there's not as much mystery. We know what we're going in there for, and we know we're going to hunt Victor Crowley. It is a bit of the Aliens setup, which, I mean, I don't mind, but it may have been more successful if this was more of an over-the-top action movie and we had more bullets flying. That maybe could have helped, but that being said, we do have some fun moments and some cool kills. I think I like the kills in part 1 a little better, but these are nothing to sneeze at. Some really interesting moments and some good practical effects work. And I also like how in this movie, Tony Todd has a plan. He says that Victor Crowley may be a ghost. He might be impossible to kill, but maybe I know what to do. His first plan is simply to blow his head off. He says, nothing can survive without a head, and if one of you brings me the head of Victor Crowley, you'll get a big cash bonus. But he has a secret second plan. In case Crowley really is a ghost, he's like, maybe there's one way I can defeat him, and he's not telling anybody, but it plays in really fun to the ending of this movie as well. So yeah, the characters aren't quite as good, and it's not quite as funny, but the movie does does have its moments, and they really do keep the world, the energy, and the momentum up from the first one, so it is still a really good, really fun, energetic movie, even if it isn't quite what the first one was. Overall, I did like it, and I can definitely recommend it. And I'd be curious, do any of you guys do the full trilogy marathon because the first three all connect? I'd be curious if anyone just, guns them all at once, right? Anyway though, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Adam Green playlist where you can see me talk about the first movie as well as Digging Up the Marrow and Frozen, and I hope to add more to this in the future. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Playlist here. Have a good day now.